Hello everyone, this is the Undying Nephilim, and today I'm going to show you guys another new feature that is being added to Hyrule Conquest. This is a feature that I have wanted in the game for a very long time. It's a feature that I think should just be in every RTS game ever. It's only been in a few of them. It's a feature that I love so much that it was even in the old Total War version of the game, although it didn't work nearly as well as I wanted, and now it's much closer to how I imagined. And that feature is minor factions. So, what is a minor faction? Well, as the name implies, they're a faction, but a lot smaller than the normal ones that you play as. They only have a few units and a few techs and just one hero. And you can't play as them directly. In order to play as a minor faction, or rather gain access to them, you pick your main faction, and then you will build a marketplace, and you will establish an embassy with the minor faction of your choosing, and that will unlock all of their buildings and units and all their goodies and stuff. In the future, there will be other ways to gain access to minor factions, such as just outright conquering them. So if you don't want to, pay them money and do the whole diplomacy thing, you can just send your little army in to crush them and gain control of them. But for the skirmish mode and the multiplayer mode, for the foreseeable future, the way to get them is at your marketplace, which I'll go ahead and build now. So when you click on the marketplace, you'll notice all these nice little icons down here, and these are the different minor factions that you can establish an embassy with. If you right click on them, you'll get some details about the background and kind of get a feel for what the minor faction will offer your own faction. Now, in the final game, there's going to be roughly 40 minor factions, so there'll be a lot of variety to pick from. The minor factions that show up in your marketplace at the moment are based on the biome of the map that you're playing on. So if you're playing on a temperate map, you'll get access to certain minor factions. If you're playing on a desert map, you'll get access to others. But regardless of the biome, there will always be 5 different minor factions that you can pick from on each map. And depending on what faction you're playing as, you'll be able to pick from more or less at one time. So for most factions, you'll be able to pick 2 at a time out of the 5. Some will have access to more, and some will have access to less. And it's probably influenced by the kind of diplomatic skill of a faction. So as an example, the Goma will probably only be able to pick 1, because the Goma are not necessarily experts in diplomacy with their neighbors. Same thing with like the Stalfos, they'll probably only be able to pick 1. Whereas more cultured and what's the word I'm looking for? I guess more diplomatic factions will have access to 3 at a time rather than just 2 or 1. But most factions in the game, almost all of them, will be able to pick from 2. And eventually we'll actually have an option in the map settings when you're setting up a match where you can just set it so that you can pick all 5 or 0 if you don't even want minor factions as a feature in your multiplayer tournaments or whatever. But they're a really awesome feature. However, since there's only 5 minor factions in the game right now, all 5 of these are going to appear in all the biomes until I get more minor factions done. So the 5 that I'm going to show in this video will be available on every map in the next release. And for the sake of this video, I've enabled it so I can pick all 5 instead of being stuck with just 2, just so I can show them all. Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and pick all 5, and then I will show you all of their stuff. Alrighty. And another thing I'm going to show in this video is the new map that I'm demonstrating it on. This is one of 2 new maps that's going to appear in the next version. It is called the Rutala Dam. If you could not guess, it's based around the Rutala Dam, and it's a very, very awesome 2v2 map. However, it's been slightly edited without any AI players, just so I can show you guys the minor factions. So, anyway, in order to get your minor faction stuff, you have to capture a camp. So the smaller nodes that you capture allow you to build their bases, which in turn allow you to churn out their units and techs. In fact, this is one of the main reasons I switched over to the node system, is because of minor factions. I felt like minor factions are such an important feature, and they work really well with this whole node system, that was one of the main things that convinced me to switch over. Other than the fact that I really like Battle for Middle-earth. But anyway, I'll go ahead and build some of their bases. So we got Lon Lon Ranch, and the Zuna, and the Tokai, and I'll go ahead and make the other two after I go through these three really quickly. So the first three that I made have technically been in the game for a while. I have covered the units of these three minor factions in other videos, I think a pretty long time ago, like 2 or 3 years ago now. Especially Lon Lon Ranch and the Zuna. So I'm only going to go over these three very briefly, since I've already covered them in more detail before. So Lon Lon Ranch, as you might imagine, gives you a bunch of cavalry related stuff, and they also have an economic thing. Their special building that they get is this grain silo, which generates food. So it's basically like an extra farm that generates more food than normal farms. And I'll go ahead and train some of their units, even though I've shown them before. So yeah, lots of different cavalry. They've got a support unit, which I don't know if I've covered this unit before, so I'll go ahead and cover it very briefly in this video. But this is the cow cart, and basically it slowly heals everything within, you know, the circle around it. Technically, it just increases their regen rate, and it only does it when they're idle. So when you're not in a fight and you have a bunch of wounded units, just have them gather around and around the cow cart full of the Lon Lon milk, and it will slowly heal them. So yeah, that is Lon Lon Ranch. And next up, we got the Zuna, who I've also covered before. So I won't go into tons of detail. I'll go ahead and make their special building, which is an oasis. And kind of like the milk cart, this building heals any unit in the base. However, it'll do it even when they're not idle. So it's it's basically a hospital. And I've covered all their units before, but they do have a new unit, which I'll go ahead and show. It's a really, really cool unit. And I've already shown those before, so I'm only going to cover this one. This unit is the Devalent, or Davalent, or I have no idea what its proper pronunciation is, because I don't think a single person in the world has ever said its name aloud. But the Devalents, which first showed up in A Link to the Past, I believe, and they've been in several games after that. It is a creature unit and also a siege unit. It has a ranged fireball attack that can damage buildings. And also, I'm thinking that when they move, as long as they're moving near enemy buildings, it'll deal small amounts of damage to the buildings as they're moving around them. So that might be pretty cool. But I haven't implemented that, and I don't even know. I don't know how I would go about doing that in the engine. So I'll have to consult Exo or Ascaris on that. But at the moment, and in the next version, they just shoot out fireballs, and they're kind of a siege unit. And the ground morphs around them, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, I've shown the Zuna's other units. Most of their units are siege units. That's kind of the bonus or the specialty of the Zuna. So if you're playing as a faction that's really bad with siege, doesn't have very many good siege units, trying to think of one that comes to mind. Ordana Province doesn't have particularly good siege units. Neither does the Gerudo. So you might want to pick the Zuna, who have 3 very, very good siege units. They also have the giant siege tower and then the giant ballistas, which I've shown before. Which I'll go ahead and make them right now, I guess, and show them really quick. Because I like their ballistas that shoot out 3 bolts at once. And then, yeah, the Devalent is a siege unit, too. So they got 3 siege units, which is really helpful if you're playing as a faction that doesn't have any. So, yeah, that is the Zuna. And then lastly is the Tokai. Well, not lastly. There's still 2 more after this. But next up is the Tokai, who are kind of a cannon fodder minor faction. They're kind of a swarmy, they have a bunch of cheap units minor faction. And also, all of their units are aquatic and can go in water. So, their special building is the Boss Chief Shack, which is this very, very giant house that provides a lot of population space. So, yeah, that's very handy if you're running low on, you know, spaces for other houses. But anyway, I have covered their units before, so I'm not gonna go into details about them. But most of their units are very cheap. Their battalion sizes are pretty large. And all of them can go in water. So if you're picking a faction that doesn't have, you know, doesn't have a lot of cheap units for the early game, kind of like the Gorons or the Dark Nuts, you might want to consider picking the Tokai, because they can give you a bunch of cheap cannon fodder as you build up your the rest of your forces. And if you're playing on a water map, they're pretty useful since they can go on water. Yeah, so that's the Tokai. And now I'm going to show the 2 brand new minor factions that have not been in the game. And I'll go into a bit more detail about their units. And the first one is the Gorons of Rolling Ridge from the Oracle games. I believe they're in both of the Oracle games, but more specifically, I want to say Oracle of Ages, but I think it's actually Oracle of Seasons. But anyway, the Gorons of Rolling Ridge have slight aesthetic differences because I wanted to distinguish them from the other Gorons. They're a little more, they're a little less volcanic and more grassy and kind of, they kind of have like a bluegrass kind of feel to them. Like the grass that grows on their heads and their buildings is based on, you know, Kentucky bluegrass. So they kind of got like this bluish aesthetic rather than the red and orange that the normal Gorons have. So I'll go ahead and train their units, which they've got quite a few. And I'll train their hero too. So let's get all these guys spread out. And I triggered an error that I'll have to go look into when this video is over. That's probably because I selected and ordered everything to move before they had finished coming out. But anyway, that's besides the point. Alrighty, so I guess I'll just start with their biggest and coolest unit, which is the Stone Talus, which is from Breath of the Wild. And it's the giant stone golems. And these things are both creature units and siege units. They're very, very durable. In fact, the kind of specialty of these Gorons is that they have very, very high armor values. So they're very hard to kill unless you are blowing them up with magic or true damage. So normal swords and hammers and spears, most normal weapons won't damage them that much. You'll need magic or explosives or something else other than normal weapons to take them out. And that is definitely the case for this guy, who is just awesome. And another ability of this unit is that when they die, they will fragment into a bunch of little stones that'll spawn a battalion of one of their other units, which are the Peblets, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate now. So when he dies, he spawns a little squad of Peblets, which I guess I'll talk about that unit next. The Peblet is just a straight-up, simple, durable melee unit. Nothing particularly special about them. Other than, you know, they spawn from their the giant stone taluses when they're destroyed. I mean, I guess they're special in the fact that they have such a high armor value for such a small unit. Like, it's really, really hard to kill them. They don't deal a lot of damage though, so they're more of a, I guess, cannon fodder. Although I don't know if that name's appropriate for them since they don't die easily, so they're more like meat shields, I guess, or rock shields. So yeah, those are the Pebblets. And then I guess I will talk about these guys next. The Bastions. Or no, these are the Busters, not the Bastions. They look similar to the Bastions, though. So the Busters are a ranged unit. They throw these large stones at enemies. And they're a siege unit. So they're a very durable ranged siege unit, which is very handy, especially if you're playing as a faction that doesn't have many good siege units. And the fact that they're high armor also makes it hard to kill them. So the best way to deal with them is, because they have a minimum range. So the best way to deal with them is actually probably cavalry. Just charge at them with cavalry, and then they'll keep running away, and they won't be able to attack. So even though your cavalry won't be doing much damage to them, they'll be kind of chasing them away, and they won't be able to unleash their attacks. However, if you're playing properly, you'll have a bunch of these guys escorting these to deal with the cavalry and stop them. So yeah, those are the Busters. And these guys are the Bastions, which are just a melee version of these guys, really. They're a very strong and durable melee unit. They have high armor. They have pretty high damage. And they're very expensive. So they're basically like a rocky version of a Dark Nut, I guess. I believe they deal knockback damage too. So they'll send the guy they're attacking in front of them flying back, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, those are the Bastions. And these over here are the Bracers, which are the smaller Goron of Rolling Ridge. And they are a kind of defensive unit. And what I am imagining is when we add attachments to battalions in the future, they might actually be a battalion that you can attach to other battalions, and they boost the armor of the battalions that they're attached to. So I'm imagining, you know, once we get attachments in, I can attach them to these Busters here, and they'll just they'll be I guess merged with this battalion, and they'll soak up all the damage while these guys don't take any damage. So that's what the plan for them is, but Exo or Ascaris needs to add the lovely, lovely attachment feature to the engine. It's not in yet. So for now, they're just kind of a bulky melee unit that can take a bunch of damage. I guess kind of similar to the Pebblets, although they move much faster than the Pebblets. So yeah, those are the Bracers. And then the hero for the Gorons of Rolling Ridge is the Elder Smog, who's loosely based on the boss from Crown Ridge in the Oracle games. Once we add hero abilities into the game, he'll have all kinds of gassy, kind of smoky special abilities, so he'll probably be able to obscure your units and cloak them. He'll probably be able to ruin the enemy's line of sight by, like, creating a giant gas cloud around them, kind of like the boss from the Oracle games. And also, like the boss from the Oracle games, he'll probably be able to split into two smaller gaseous cloud creatures when he's killed. But for now, like a lot of the heroes in the game, sadly, he's mostly just a damage sponge, or he deals high damage, since hero abilities are not in the engine yet. But when the abilities are added into the engine, a lot of the heroes are going to become pretty awesome. But anyway, so those are their units, and their special building is the Talus Mine, which is this structure here. And the Talus Mine basically just generates stone or material for you to build more buildings, and it does it infinitely, which is very useful, because I don't think there's any factions in the game right now that can generate stone from a farm-type building yet. I know that the Zora and the Deku Scrubs can generate ore, but I don't think there's any that generate stone right now, not even the Gorons. So yeah, those are the Gorons of Rolling Ridge, which I think are an awesome faction. I also really like them aesthetically. I try to keep as close to the canon designs as possible, but I felt like because these guys in the Oracle games, they just look like, you know, normal Gorons but blue. I thought that was a little boring, and I don't think they have too many hardcore fans, so I think people would probably be fine if I really messed with their designs. So I did. I messed with their designs, and they look only vaguely how they looked in the Oracle games. They got way more like stony kind of stone-like, you know, aesthetics on their bodies, and they got like the blue grass growing on their heads and stuff, and I think they look really cool. So yeah, that's the Gorons of Rolling Ridge. And now I will cover the last minor faction, which is my favorite of the 5. And that is the Wizrobes. So let me go to make their base. And train their units. And I'll go ahead and show all their units. And I can't make their hero, because you can only have one minor faction hero at a time. So let me kill this guy. Goodbye, Smog. And then I'll go ahead and train the Wizrobe hero. Alrighty. So yeah, the Wizrobes are probably the coolest of the minor factions right now. They were originally going to be one of the playable factions, but when I moved over to Hyrule Conquest and the size of the army rosters for all the factions doubled, I felt like they're kind of like a one-trick pony, I guess, and it's kind of stretching credibility to give them 20 different units that are all just, you know, mages with different status effects. So I felt like it was probably better to kind of demote them to a minor faction that you can add to your main faction and boost their, you know, their magic capacity. In fact, a lot of factions in the game are lacking in mages, so the Wizrobes are probably one of the most valuable minor factions you can pick, because they'll give you mages. Just right off the bat, factions I can think of that don't have any magic capacity at all are Ordana Province, the Moblins, the Gorons, I get the Goma. So yeah, there's a lot of factions that'll massively benefit from picking the Wizrobe as one of their minor factions. So I'll go ahead and cover their units. And I'll cover their coolest one first, which is the Conjurer, or the Toucan guy from Wind Waker. And what the Conjurer does, as implied by his name, is he can summon a bunch of creatures. In the final version of the game, he'll have access to like a ton of different creatures, but since I don't have a ton of different creatures in the game, there's only going to be 3 right now. And the first one is a bunch of Mad Scrubs. So, the Mad Scrubs, just like the wild counterparts or the ones that spawn when Deku Scrubs die, they'll run around everywhere and their health will slowly drain. However, these Mad Scrubs won't attack your own guys. So another handy thing about the Mad Scrubs is that they're very cheap, they're very quick to summon, and you can summon a lot of them. So I'm imagining, you know, an enemy army is approaching, and you click your Conjurers, and you plop down about 5 of these, and then you just have a giant blob of Mad Scrubs going crazy and messing up their army while yours bombards them with magic. So I'll go ahead and summon a few of these. And instant build is on, so they'll summon pretty fast. As soon as he gets there. So yeah, he summons them pretty much instantly. And yeah, the Mad Scrubs will just swarm around everywhere until their health drains and they die. So I just think that's really cool. I thought that was a really cool thing to give the Wizrobes, just an ability to summon a bunch of angry Mad Scrubs. Alrighty. And their other 2 summons are not as interesting to me, but they're very useful. One of them is a bunch of Arma statues, which I have covered in another video. so I won't go into details about them. All you need to know is that they're high armor, and they're very durable. And all the Mad Scrubs are dead now. And then the last unit of theirs that they can summon is a Tweelizora, which originally was going to be a design for a Zora creature that was not from the Twilight Realm, but I decided, you know what, it glows, it looks like it's from the Twilight Realm, so these are going to be my Tweelizora. So I have also shown these in another video, but they weren't called Twilight Zoras, but so yeah, there's your first look at the Twilight races that'll be added into the game eventually. There's a little Wizrobe feature. So yeah, that is the Conjurer. Probably the coolest of the Wizrobe units. The rest of their units are pretty straightforward. They're all mages that just deal a very specific type of elemental damage. Well, except these guys. You got the fire ones, which shoot fireballs and deal fire damage. You got ice ones, which shoot ice and freeze enemies in place. And you got earth ones, which throw giant rocks at people. But they're also a siege unit too, so they're like a siege mage. They're basically catapults, mage catapults that throw giant boulders at buildings and stuff. So yeah, those are their three kind of elemental mages. And then they have the illusionists, which are these guys, which you might be able to tell from the little lens of truth above them, but they are invisible to enemies, so they're a stealth unit. They are completely invisible until they attack, and then they're exposed, or if the enemy has, detector units, they'll be able to see them. And they basically are a melee unit that just attacks enemies with some kind of melee magic. And they're very useful for sneaking around the map. Actually, for all the Wizrobe units, they all hover, so they can pass over water and mountains and other terrain. So they're very maneuverable for mages, which is pretty awesome. And then their hero is Karok, who I believe is the only named Wizrobe in the entire Zelda series. I'm struggling to think of an... Oh, no, I thought of another one. Wizro from Hyrule Warriors is another named Wizrobe. But Karok is the one I picked because I like him more. He's from Zelda 2. And I have a feeling he was in another game, but he wasn't called Karok in another game. It was just a boss that was based on his design and his attack patterns. But I'm having trouble remembering because there's just too many things to remember. But anyway, he's a stealth hero, so he's invisible until he attacks or he's detected by a scout. And he throws fireballs, so he is a mage that throws fireballs and is invisible. And when hero abilities are added into the engine, he'll be able to teleport, and he'll be able to do all kinds of cool things. So yeah, that's Karok, or Karok. I don't know how to pronounce his name, because no one has said it in the history of the entire series. And unfortunately for the Wizrobe building, their special building, it doesn't function yet, but I talked to Ascaris recently, and he might be able to get it to work before I release this publicly, but maybe not. And basically, their special building is a teleporter, which you'll be able to garrison units in it, and then it can teleport them anywhere within your territory. So it's kind of like a mass teleporter that'll send your units anywhere you control, which is very, very handy. And yeah, I like the Wizrobe buildings in general. I think they look really cool. Basically, in Nephi canon, the kind of background of the Wizrobes is they used to have, this awesome, magical civilization a long time ago. And then, like Atlantis, they blew it and they destroyed themselves and all of their cities sunk underground. So they have all of these, ruined cities that have been buried under the earth for, hundreds or thousands of years or whatever. And when they get, when an embassy is established with them, and their aid is requested by another faction, they raise their buildings from under the ground, and yeah, that's why they got all these like rocky bits like entangled with the ruined skeletons of their once proud cities. So yeah, that's the Wizrobe. And those are the 5 minor factions that will be showing up in the next version of Hyrule Conquest. Now, when does the next version come out? Well, if you're a patron, you've already been playing this for about a week or two. So, if you become a patron, you can go ahead and download them and play them right now. But as for a public release, I want to say probably a week or two. I haven't really decided yet. There's still a few small issues I'm trying to fix before I release it publicly. Another really cool thing about this version that I can't really show in the video, but, you know, it'll be obvious when you download it, is Hyrule Conquest will now come in a very, very compressed archive. So the file size of the mod has gone from 10 gigabytes to only 2.5 gigabytes. And the installation should be much easier. All you'll have to do is drag the compressed archive onto ZeroAD's exe, and it'll unpack them. Well, it'll place the mod in the proper location for you. It'll keep it packed. You can manually unpack it later if you want to like edit the files and stuff. But it'll put the compressed archive in the proper location, and it'll automatically start it up in the mod menu. So you won't have to, you know, worry about unpacking it in the wrong file location. It'll handle all of that for you, and the patrons have tested it out, and it seems to work, unless you're in Linux. So it might not work if you're using a different OS other than Windows. But if you're using Windows, it'll unpack in the right location and stuff, and it'll save a bunch of file space, and it won't take as long to download. So yeah. And I think I said it earlier, but there's going to be 2 new maps in the game. The first one is the Rutala Dam, which is the one I demonstrated this map on, which might be my favorite map in the game right now. This map will actually be the first map that is host to a specific game mode that I'm going to add into the game at a later date. But I'll go into more details about that when I get around to adding that to the engine. For now, it's just a 2v2 map, so you'll have 2 players, either on the north versus south, or the east versus west. Or if you're crazy, you know, it can do diagonal. But yeah, the dam is just awesome. This is probably one of the coolest maps. And even outside the dam, I just think the mountainscape on this map looks really cool. There are also the little history tablets, or the history monuments that the Ruzora built, are scattered around this map. At the moment, they don't do anything. I'm thinking it'd be cool if they had some kind of bonus effect, like if you capture them. But I haven't really thought of anything that they could do. But if any of you guys have any ideas, feel free to recommend them to me, and I'll consider making these things actually do something other than being a little decoration. I have a feeling in the campaign there'll probably be some kind of mission objective, like you have to protect them or something, but the campaign is so far off in the future, I haven't really thought about it in tons of detail yet. But anyway, that is the 5 minor factions. Hopefully they look cool, and hopefully you guys look forward to downloading this immediately if you're a patron, or sometime in the next few weeks if you are not. Anyway, stay tuned for more new features. I'll probably actually have quite a bit of Star Fox stuff coming out soon, because as you know, I've been working with Estelle Ellis. We're about to do a bunch of Star Fox stuff, so there'll actually probably be a lot more of that coming soon. I think Star Fox is going to become much more of a priority for obvious reasons. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for more Hyrule Conquest features. I believe next up is going to be a new faction. And I'm not going to hint at who it is next, but it might involve a certain place where the sun never sets or rises. But anyway, you guys all have a good one.
Hey, listen!